But with Donald Trump now gone from the White House and Nancy Pelosi's men in control of the Congress, Senate and presidency, many are worried for the future of free speech in the United States and indeed in the Western world. Free speech is a fundamental right in America. It's enshrined in law and practiced more so, I think, than here. However, it's equally obvious that it's been under sustained assault for years and her barricades are beginning to crumble. Now, Donald Trump as president was a great defender of the right to free speech. He was, as a personality, prone to bluster and in many ways the personification of the antithesis of all that is politically correct and stifling about the postmodern age. However, it's important to note that even under his tutelage, the assault on free speech continued to snowball. As Christopher Caldwell wrote recently in The Times, no national candidate has ever calumniated political correctness with such contempt, and yet no president has ever permitted political correctness to tighten its hold so much on the lives of the citizens. In other words, despite Trump's attempt to open the national discourse up to a wider number of Americans and indeed enfranchise the views of the Rust Belt, the tide of wrong speak and forbidden subjects continued just to sweep in. And with the social media behemoths now playing censor with political material, I think we've entered a new chapter in the suppression of free speech, not just in the USA, but indeed more broadly. Once the 21st century's rostra for the dissemination of all sorts of ideas and opinions, Facebook, Twitter and their ilk are rapidly morphing into a digitised groupthink, a Silicon Valley Pravda, where wrong opinions disappear and non-aligned voices, well, they're just not welcomed. Now, I think all of this speaks to a dwindling maturity within Western society. We are becoming what we claim to stand tall against. We once held our system up as an open, free, tolerant, uncensored beacon of hope for others to emulate. But today we seem increasingly keen to take our cue from those others as we stifle speech, suffocate thought, indeed strangle tolerance into submission. However, unlike those aforementioned others, it's not necessarily the government doing the censorship here. In the West, that challenge has been enthusiastically embraced by sections of academia and business, technology platforms, even citizen groups, unable to embrace the art of simply agreeing to disagree. Now, none of this is meant to excuse grotesque breaches of decency or defamation or the old screaming fire in a crowded theatre. However, Voltaire's maxim about defending to the end the right to expression of someone with a different point of view needs urgent resuscitation. To this end, the new all-powerful Biden administration can show the way, although I won't be holding my breath, despite some encouraging words from that inauguration address. All right, well, let's bring in my view, first-timer Justin Smith. What do you make of it?
Michael, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. What do I make of that? Well, when you mention Voltaire, I love that line from Voltaire, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. I also might point out that Voltaire said a witty phrase proves nothing. I think free speech is wonderful, all for it. I will defend anyone for free speech, but free speech is a little bit like a carrot. A carrot can be nutritious for you unless you stick it in the wrong hole, and then it can be incredibly painful. And for me, I think I look at this. Yeah, don't. I recommend you stay well clear of that. But with the Trump, I mean, when you talk about free speech, I want to ask this question. When people talk about free speech and they say that it is dwindling and is going away, what is it that you want to say that you feel that you're not able to say anymore? And what do you think those repercussions are? I think free speech is alive and well. With that business with Trump and what he did is Twitter, for example, Twitter are the publisher of those tweets. And if he did something that they felt was inciting violence, they've got every right as a publisher to ditch it, just as Sky News or any newspaper.
Yeah, they do. Let me ask you, though, then, Justin, the straw that broke the camel's back in the case of Trump, and I was on air on radio when this came through, was his final tweet, well, meant to be his final tweet, where he simply wrote, "To those who have asked, I will not be attending the inauguration." Now, that apparently was so dangerous that Twitter thought, well, we better get rid of him off the platform. And if it was just Twitter, fine. But then it was Facebook and it was every other platform. And there seems to be a concerted effort here. And it's not just him, he's the poster boy, but there's a lot of people that genuinely feel, I don't think they're right, but they genuinely feel that the election was stolen from them. Now, Some might say that's a conspiracy theory, but some on the right would say that some of the catch cries of the BLM movement are conspiracy theories, and yet nothing that they say is censored. Indeed, the Chinese government can go on and put on a doctored image of an Australian SAS soldier about to behead a young Afghan girl with a little goat or sheep. That's apparently okay, but according to Twitter, to tell the American people you won't be attending an inauguration is akin to hate crime. Now,
yeah, but I really don't believe
free speech.
Look, I'm not here to stick up for Twitter. I mean, it's their private company, and they're not going to do everything right all the time. I don't believe that he was ditched for that final tweet. I think it was the rest of it. I don't think you can incite violence. You can't do it. I just think that what he did was incredibly dangerous, as we've seen for the deaths of many people as a result of those riots. It was awful. And I think if Twitter had have actually allowed that to go ahead, I think that would have been just an absolute disgrace. And I think it free. Don't tell me Trump hasn't got free speech. He was president. He can get out. If he calls for a camera to be in front of him, it'll be in front of him in 2 minutes, and he can say whatever the hell he wants to say.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm not sure about that, Justin, because the camera might be there, but they turn it off pretty quickly. Let me bring in Catherine here. Catherine, what do you make of this issue? Because I know you've thought about it deeply.
Well, Michael, the point's well made to the extent that it did stun me to think that Twitter would actually shut down unilaterally the account of a serving US president. I thought that was a breathtaking act of arrogance. Justin, likewise, though, makes a valid point. I think those who've tried to tiptoe around this and say there was no incitement in the events leading up to the Capitol assault are kidding themselves. That ugly event was the culmination of some off the charts incitement for some time. He was a sore loser. He behaved appallingly, and he knew that he was playing with a match and a tinder box on some of the things he said, with a very volatile following who believed deeply in him. Your point is well made in that I do think that the US entrenchment of a constitutional right to free speech, which has been very, very robustly defended by its highest courts, I think it's a good thing. I had the great pleasure of serving on a panel once with Jordan Peterson, who refused to take a knee, as it were, before that term became popular, on compelled speech, and I supported him on that, notwithstanding that I was in the minority group who actually was the target of that. The thing I would say, though, is that I'm just not going to go into the business of being a regime dead-ender for Trump. I don't think... I'm aligned with Greg Craven on this one, and Paul Kelly and others who've stood back and said what's worth keeping and what isn't worth keeping out of the legacy. I don't think he was a conservative. I think he was a disruptor. Good luck to him. There were certain things that it was very hard to judge him like a normal politician. Greg Sheridan once wrote that. And to get separate the curate's egg, as it were, the withdrawing from endless wars tick, I supported that. But the general coarsening of public discourse, I think, brought disgrace to that office. His refusal to attend the inauguration was pathetic and adolescent. And frankly, I think there's a deeper problem that predated and will post-date either of these administrations, and that is the suppression of free speech on campuses, both here and overseas. The idea that you can't have dangerous ideas because they'll hurt someone is the death of the academy in the West.
Well, I'm glad you made that point, Tanvi. Let me bring you in here because this is more than... it's easy to get bogged down in Trump. He's, I suppose, an extreme version of any of this. But this is broader than just Trump. This is a big issue. Trump, I suppose, helped personify it and push it to the fore from a presidential table. But this, as Catherine correctly says, goes to academia. This goes to the business world. I mean, it's true. There are some topics which are now out of bounds. They're not illegal, but if you dare raise them, good luck keeping your job.
Well, Trump's just exposed an ongoing issue that's only got bigger, and that's really that the tech platforms have become effectively the public square. And this is where the argument they're private companies, they can do what they like, suddenly argued by leftists, which is quite amusing. But they have become effectively the public square, but they are woefully inadequate. They're not established to conduct that role. So some of that has to be outsourced, and all governments around the world are looking into how to best regulate that in a significant way. And I think there's little question that when they have acted, and even Jack Dorsey, the chief and founder of Twitter, has said the few conservatives he has in his company are scared to speak of their opinions. And we've seen with all the tech platforms, they're far more likely to shut down or demonetize. Remember, that's the other way they do it. So on YouTube, you can still say something, but we won't pay you. You won't get any revenue from it. That's the other way it happens. And sometimes it's just been egregious. And I know we're talking about India later. There's a great example where they shut down Milo Yiannopoulos' Twitter handle. At the same time, Lashkar-e-Toiba, who are responsible for the Mumbai terror attacks, they had their Twitter and they were going out tweeting. So I think, look, the fact is we have to accept they are the public square, more than any national newspaper now. And they have roles which I don't think they're capable of fulfilling. And that's where there needs to be, whether it's outside panels or some sort of government influence. Otherwise, I think you get these unilateral moves and it makes me very uncomfortable.
It's a brave new world.